Subscribe before we start, and make one guess in the comments. Why do you think a dead ranger's voice came through that radio? Keep your answer until the end. Unit 412 called in a swimmer off the Portage breakwater at 6:52 in the morning, and I gave the call a number and put a ranger on it. Unit 412 is Milo Ferris. Milo drowned in February. I heard him say the words as clear as I've heard anything in 14 years on that console. And by 7:30, a retired mill hand named Anthony Zabrowski had gone into that water and had not come out. The call is on the logging recorder. Timestamp, channel, 4.5 seconds of it. I've listened to it more times than I should admit, and it is his voice, his cadence, the little catch he had when he was walking and talking at the same time. So either I am wrong about something very large, or the park's emergency communications system carried traffic from a man who has been dead since the 9th of February. Those were the only two options I had that morning, and I did not have time to pick one. Here's how it went, in order, because order is the only thing I'm actually good at. I'm the lead communications operator for Indiana Dunes National Park. The center sits in a low brick building off Mineral Springs Road in Porter. 2 consoles, one of them usually dark. We cover 15,000 acres, strung out along 15 miles of Lake Michigan shoreline, wedged in between Gary on one end and Michigan City on the other. With steel mills and a commuter rail line, and about 3 million visitors a year threaded through the middle of it. Law enforcement, EMS, fire, beach operations, all of it comes across one repeated channel to me. On a July weekend, I'll run 400 transmissions before lunch. On a Tuesday in June at 6:45, I'm alone with a cup of coffee and the mosquito trucks. The tone hit and the traffic came in without a unit ident first, which is normal for our people. They mostly just start talking. Dispatch, 412. I've got a swimmer past the end of the breakwater, east side. He's not making progress. Looks like he's going with it. I keyed up and said, go ahead with your location, and he gave me the Portage lakefront lot. And I remember my hand was already moving to the CAD before any part of my brain caught up. That's the thing nobody understands about this job. Your hands are faster than you are. 14 years of hands. Then he said, copy that, boss, which he always did, and which I had not heard anybody say since winter. And by then, Ruthie Tumash was on the air taking the assignment. 412's already there? She said. I'm 2 minutes out on Marquette. And I said yes. I want to be careful here because that yes is the whole rest of my life. I said, affirmative. 412 is on scene, east side of the breakwater, swimmer in distress. And Ruthie said she was en route. And I toned out Portage Fire in the county for water rescue, and I got Station Michigan City on the phone for the Coast Guard. And for about 6 minutes, it was the best morning I ever had on that console. Everything moved. Everyone answered. Ruthie is 61 years old, and she was a Great Lakes lifeguard before I was born. And she went off those rocks in her uniform pants with her belt still on, which is not procedure, and which she would tell you is not something she decided to do. Anthony Zabrowski was fishing the wall about 80 feet down from her, 67, retired out of Burns Harbor, out there most mornings with a bucket and a thermos. He watched a gray-haired park ranger jump into water that was 54 degrees, and he put his rod down and went in after her. She came out. He didn't. That's the part I can still hear, not the radio. The next 12 minutes of me trying to run a shoreline search with 3 agencies, while a Portage engine company screamed at each other on a channel they weren't supposed to be on, and Ruthie coughing into her lapel mic, saying there was a man right behind me. They found him a little before 10, about 200 yards east, in 11 feet of water. There was never any swimmer. Nobody reported one missing. No car in the lot but Zabrowski's truck and a dog walker's Corolla. Nothing washed up, nothing floated, no towel on the sand, no shoes. And Milo Ferris, Unit 412, has been dead since February. Now, my first thought was not a ghost. I want that on the record, whatever the record is worth now. My first thought was his radio. We never recovered it. When Milo went into the water off Camille Road that night in February, he went in wearing about 30 pounds of gear, and the divers got him and his belt and one boot, and the portable was gone. It's a $500 problem child of a radio, and it has been sitting in our property loss file since spring, as not recovered, presumed lake bottom. So when I heard his voice, the first thing my mouth said out loud, alone in that room, was, somebody found Milo's radio. That was clean. That worked. Kids find it in the sand. Kids play with it. A kid with a sick sense of humor sits in the portage lot at dawn and makes a fake call. It's a federal crime and it's stupid, but it is a thing a human being could do. And I have taken worse from human beings. Except a portable that's been in Lake Michigan since February does not power up. And even if it did, the battery would have died before Easter. And it wouldn't be Milo's voice. It'd be some kid's voice. And it wouldn't have said copy that, boss, to a call nobody had given him yet. Warren Skiba, our chief of emergency services, got there around 11 after the recovery and stood behind my chair with his arms crossed the way he does. Warren is a decent man in a bad spot, and I'll get to the spot. He listened to me lay it out, and then he asked me 3 questions, in this order. Was I sure of the voice? Had I been feeling all right? And was there any chance it came off a mutual aid channel with a stuck microphone somewhere? I told him a stuck mic doesn't have a conversation with you. You had traffic both ways, he said. He answered me, Warren. He acknowledged. He said copy that. Warren looked at the ceiling tile for a while. Then he said, so we've got a radio problem. And I understood right then that we were going to be speaking 2 different languages for a long time, and that his was the one that came with a budget code. I pulled the file myself that afternoon. Our logging recorder is an old rack-mounted unit in the back closet, hums like a refrigerator, records every transmission on the primary with a time and channel stamp, and holds it for 90 days. I sat in that closet on a milk crate with a headset on, and I found 652, and I played it. It's there, 4.5 seconds, and then my own voice, and then 2.5 more. Him and me, back and forth, exactly the way I remembered it, which I'll be honest, was not what I wanted. Some part of me had gone into that closet hoping to find nothing at all, because a woman who hears things is a woman with a problem she can maybe treat. I burned a copy to a disk before I did anything else. I don't know why. Habit, or the same instinct that makes you take a picture of a dent in a rental car. Then I went up to the hospital in Portage because Ruthie was still there. And somebody from the office ought to have been. She was sitting up on the gurney in a warming blanket with her hair flat and gray against her skull and her lips still that bad color. And she'd already given her statement to 2 people, and she didn't want to give it to me. She wanted to talk about Zabrowski's wife. Then she went quiet for a bit and asked me who had made the initial report. I said 412. She didn't look surprised. That's what I keep coming back to, a 61-year-old ranger who's just watched a stranger drown behind her. And I tell her a dead man called it in, and she doesn't ask me to repeat it. He said my name, she said, on the rocks, before I went in. He said, Ruthie, he's going under. I told her that wasn't possible, that she'd been on the air with me, and there was no traffic like that, and I would know because I was the one listening. She said, I know you were. Then she asked me, very carefully, like she already knew the shape of the answer, whether anybody else on the beach detail had heard the original call come out. I hadn't checked. I checked from the parking lot, on my phone, standing next to my car in the sun. Nobody had. Not one of them. 2 rangers, a maintenance crew, and a seasonal on the West Beach gate, all monitoring the same primary channel that morning. And every single one of them told me the first thing they heard was me putting Ruthie en route. Kip Larimer came out Thursday with a laptop bag and a coffee from the gas station on 20. And he was cheerful about it, because he was 26 and it was the most interesting ticket he'd ever been handed. Kip's the contract tech who keeps our radio gear breathing. His outfit is out of Valparaiso and they've had the park's maintenance agreement for 6 or 7 years, which mostly means he drives out twice a month to reseat a card and eat lunch in his van. He knew Milo. Everybody knew Milo. Milo had that quality where after 2 conversations, he'd remembered your kid's name. I told him what I had. He asked to hear the file before I told him anything else, which I appreciated. And he listened to it twice with his eyes on the floor and then said, "That's him." "That's him," I said. "Okay." He set the headphones down and rubbed his face. "Okay, so this is going to sound like I'm dodging you, but I have to start with the boring part." The boring part is the repeater. Everything on our primary channel goes up to a repeater on a tower and comes back down, because 15 miles of shoreline with a steel mill in the middle of it is not a place where 2 handhelds talk to each other directly. The repeater is a machine, and machines keep books. Every time it opens up to pass traffic, it writes a line. Time, duration, and which radio's identity code came in with the signal. Our portables all announce themselves. It's how we know who's talking when somebody keys up and gets stepped on. Kip pulled the repeater log for that Tuesday morning and put the screen where I could see it. There's 6:51 nothing. There's 6:52, and there's 1 entry, 7 seconds, and the ident is mine. The base station. Me saying go ahead with your location. Nothing before it. Nothing between mine and Ruthie's. The repeater has no record of Milo Ferris transmitting, because as far as that machine is concerned, nobody did. "So it came in on a different channel," I said. He shook his head. "The recorder's wired to the primary. Just the primary. It doesn't have ears anywhere else. Then it came in without going through the repeater. Simplex, direct, whatever you call it. Then you'd have picked it up at the base and the recorder would have caught it, and there'd be no repeater entry. Sure, that part works." He turned the laptop back toward himself. "Except there's no squelch tail." He had to explain that one twice. When a radio stops transmitting, there's a 1/4 second of noise at the tail end. A little burst of hash before the channel closes. It's the sound of a real signal ending. Every transmission on that recorder for 90 days has one. He scrolled through and showed me, one after another, this little spike at the end of each waveform, like a period at the end of a sentence. Milo's traffic doesn't have one. Not at 6:52 and not at the end of Copy That, Boss. It starts and it stops, clean on both ends, like something that was never a radio wave at all. Like somebody pasted a voice memo into the middle of the tape. Could somebody have done that? I asked. Edited it in after? Physically, somebody'd have to be in that closet with a laptop and know the file structure on a unit built in 2009. He shrugged. And then they'd have to get you to also remember hearing it live. Which, no offense, Delia, but you do remember hearing it live. I do. Yeah. He closed the laptop. So I can't write that up. That was the first moment I understood I was in trouble, and it had nothing to do with anything supernatural. The audio existed. The signal didn't. Which meant that at 6:52 in the morning, I'd been the only living person in the state of Indiana who heard Milo Ferris speak. And the machine in my back closet had agreed with me, and the machine that keeps score had not. Warren called me into his office Friday. He had the door open, which is his way of telling you it's not a discipline conversation. And then he closed it, which is his way of changing his mind. "You know where we are in the calendar," he said. I did. There is a proposal on a desk in Indianapolis and another one in Washington to fold our comm center into the Porter County Consolidated Dispatch downtown. It's not a crazy idea. They've got 12 positions and a backup center and a training officer. We've got 2 consoles and me. The argument for keeping us is that a county dispatcher does not know what the water looks like off Mount Baldy when the wind comes around to the north, and does not know that the Camille Road gate is chained after Halloween, and cannot tell from a caller's breathing whether they're on the beach or up on the ridge. That argument is made out of performance numbers and incident reviews. It's made out of me being right on tape, over and over, for 14 years. "I need you to think about how that report reads," Warren said. "Not to me, to somebody in a room in 9 months who's never met you. It reads like what happened. It reads like the dispatcher on duty during a fatality has an unexplained phantom transmission and a hunch." He put his hands flat on the desk. "Delia, I have a family lawyering up over a man who drowned in park water because a park employee told him to expect a rescue that nobody can substantiate. I have to put something in a box on a form. If the box says equipment, we have a maintenance finding and a corrective action, and we look like people who fix things. If the box says anything else, then it says operator. Then it says nothing at all, which is worse." He wasn't enjoying himself. That's the thing about Warren. He'd have taken my side in a straight fight. He just wasn't in a straight fight. "Larimer's people are bidding on the consolidation build-out. Did he mention that?" He had not. "He'll find you a defect if there's a defect," Warren said. "He's got every reason to. Here's the part I hadn't planned to put in. My father is in a memory care place on the east side of Michigan City, a good one, with a courtyard and a woman on the day shift named Bernice, who plays him Sinatra. It costs more per month than my mortgage. My insurance is federal, my seniority differential is real money, and between the two of them, I keep him in that building and out of the county facility with the linoleum and the television bolted to the wall. He knows my voice on the phone about half the time now. He doesn't know my face at all. So when Warren said, 'Think about how that report reads,' I did think about it. I thought about it very concretely. That's not something I'm proud of, and it's not something I'll pretend I didn't do." Kip called me that Sunday on my cell. "I ran the background," he said, "on the 4.5 seconds. Pulled his voice down as far as I could and just listened to what's behind it. Behind it there is wind, which fits, and there is water, which fits. And there is something else that he'd cleaned up and looped for me, and he played it down the phone. It's a sound like a heavy door dragging over grit. It comes and goes with a slow rhythm, groan and settle, groan and settle. I didn't have a word for it, and Kip did. Because Kip grew up in Whiting and spent every winter of his childhood on that shoreline. "That's shelf ice," he said. "That's the ice going up and down on the swell. You hear it all along there in February. There's not a place on this lake that sounds like that in June." The second call came on the 10th of June, a Wednesday, 10 after 8 in the evening, and I knew before he finished the first sentence. "Dispatch, 412. Swimmer past the end of the breakwater. 2 of them, I think. They're not coming back in. And under it, faint, the door dragging over grit." I want to tell you that I made a decision. What actually happened is that my hands stopped. 14 years of hands, and they came off the keyboard and sat in my lap. And I heard myself say, 412, repeat your location and advise if you have a callback number for the reporting party. Nothing. Wind and ice. I said it again. I asked for a plate on any vehicle in the lot. I asked for a description of clothing. I held 2 protection rangers and a beach supervisor on the air, listening to me ask a dead man for a callback number. And one of them, Ruthie, keyed up twice to say she could start that way. And both times I told her to stand by. 90 seconds, maybe a little more. At 8:12, a woman on the West Beach Access called the county on her cell phone about a boy in the trough, 3 miles west of the breakwater. Real boy, real water, real mother screaming behind her on the tape. County pushed it to me. I sent everything I had, and everything I had was standing by. And the lifeguards got him out and worked on him on the sand, and he came back. He's fine. He's a sophomore now. Nobody died. But there is a stretch on that recording of about 1.5 minutes where the park's emergency communications system is fully occupied by me stalling, and the county's transfer is stacked behind it. And when the review came back, it said what it was always going to say. Delayed dispatch of resources. Failure to follow water rescue protocol. Letter of counseling. 90-day performance plan. A meeting on the calendar with someone from the regional office. Warren didn't write it to hurt me. He wrote it because it was accurate. Ruthie showed up at my house that Saturday with a bottle of Old Forester and stood on the step until I let her in. She didn't take her jacket off. She sat at my kitchen table and poured 2 fingers into a coffee mug and looked at it instead of drinking it. I was 17, she said. 1982. I was guarding at Porter Beach, and I got pulled off a sandbar by the outflow, and 2 men came in after me. She turned the mug around on the table a half turn. One of them came out, she said. And that August, I heard the other one on the beach radio. She told it the way people tell things they've told to nobody, out of order, with long gaps, correcting herself on details that didn't matter. The outflow at Porter Beach used to run different than it does now. There was a pipe and a rubble apron, and the current came around it in a way that made a good sandbar and a bad hole. And in August of 1982, a 17-year-old guard walked out on that bar to wave a family back. And the bar wasn't where she'd left it that morning. I wasn't scared, Ruthie said. That's what I remember. I was mad. I had a rescue tube in my hand, and I couldn't get my arm up out of the water to use it. 2 men came off the beach. One was somebody's father, in his 40s, in cut-off jeans. The other was older, gray, and she never learned much about him, except that he'd been sitting up by the snack stand with a newspaper. The father got to her first and got a hand under her arm, and they went under together twice. And then she was on the sand with somebody's knee in her back, coughing. The older man never came up. They dragged the whole cove, she said. 2 days. He was maybe 40 feet out. 40 feet. I asked her the wrong question. I asked if the water had been rough. She looked at me like I'd asked whether the man had been wearing a hat. It was a nice day, she said. That's the point. It was a nice day. She went back to work 11 days later, because that's what you did. And on the last Sunday in August, the beach radio put out a swimmer at the outflow. The voice came in over the head guard's hand held, while 4 of them were standing right there at the stand. Ruthie heard it. Everybody heard it. She said the head guard's name was on the tip of her tongue for 30 years, and then one day it wasn't. And she was ashamed of that. It was him, she said. It was the man from the newspaper. And I knew it was him, and I said so. And I was 17, and I'd swallowed a lot of lake, so. The head guard put 2 boats out. It took 40 minutes to establish that there was nobody in the water at the outflow, and never had been. And by the time they got that squared away, one of the boat crew was gone. 19 years old? Went in to check something he thought he saw under the hull. Ruthie quit guarding that week and didn't go back near the water in a work capacity for 11 years. And then she came at it sideways, through law enforcement, in a uniform, up on the road, where she could keep an eye on it. "You know what I finally figured out?" she said. "Took me most of my life. Nothing happens if nobody goes in." She still hadn't touched the whiskey. She'd poured it and turned the mug and left it. "That's it," she said. "That's the whole thing. There's no swimmer. There's never a swimmer. But if you put somebody in the water, it takes one. Not the one it went after, just one, out of whoever's in there." I said the only thing I had, which was that in June it took the man who got a hand on her. In '82, it took the one who didn't, she said. I went out to the breakwater the next morning. I had the day off and I wasn't sleeping anyway. It's a working wall, the Portage Marina side. Concrete and armor stone, a couple 100 yards of it running out into open water, with a walkway on top and a rail on the harbor side. You can drive to the lot and be out at the end in 5 minutes. That's the whole problem with it. It puts a person in reach of deep water without a single hard step in between. Somebody had zip-tied a laminated photo of Anthony Zabrowski to the rail, about 80 feet from the end, along with a rosary and a plastic flower arrangement already going pale. His rod holder was still clamped to the pipe 2 feet down from the photo. Nobody'd had the heart to take it off. I looked over the east side, where the traffic said the swimmer was. The water there is green and clear for about a step and a half. There's a shelf of rubble along the base of the wall, 3 feet deep, maybe 4, and you can see individual stones and a beer can and a length of yellow rope. And then it stops. Not a slope. A line, dark as a curb, where the fill ends and the lake floor drops away. And past that line, it's just a color with no bottom in it. 11, 12 feet within a stride. A 61-year-old woman in a duty belt goes off that wall thinking she's landing in the shallow part because from up top, the shallow part is the only part you can see. I stood there long enough that a guy walking a shepherd asked me if I was all right. The water safety report is a real thing that I do. Every year in July, I put together a summary of park water incidents for the county's annual review, because I'm the one with access to the CAD history, and nobody else wants to. It goes to the health department, the sheriff, the 2 hospitals, and the school districts. And it's how they decide where to spend money on signage and swim lessons. It is the most boring 9 pages I produce. And it is the only reason I have 20 years of drowning data on my desk, without having to explain to anyone why I want it. 19 people have drowned in park water in the last 20 years. That's the headline number. And it's the one the newspaper uses when the wind comes around in September. I sorted them a different way that week. I put them in 2 columns. People who went in the water for themselves, and people who went in the water after somebody else. 11 went in after somebody else. 11 out of 19. Fathers mostly, and older brothers, and 1 deputy, and a lifeguard's boyfriend, and a school teacher from Griffith who went in after a kid she'd never met. In the great majority of those 11, the person they went in after came out alive. In 3 of them, Milo's, Zabrowski's, and 1 in 2011, I'd never had cause to look at closely. There was no other person in the water at all. Ruthie's boat crewman would make 4. But he sits decades past the edge of what I had on that desk. I sat with that for a long time, because as a number, it isn't necessarily strange. Rescuers drown. That's a known thing. It's in the literature. It's why we teach reach, throw, row, go, and why we tell people not to be a hero. Any lifeguard in the country will tell you the second victim is the one who dies. So the data didn't prove anything. That's the honest position. What the data did was tell me what the thing was fishing with. It doesn't put a swimmer in the water. It puts a swimmer in your ear. And then it waits to see who cares enough to go. I did the February file on a Thursday night, alone. Second console dark, 10 o'clock. Nobody on the air but a maintenance guy locking gates on the east end. I'd been avoiding it for 2 weeks. 90 days is our retention window, so February should have been long gone. But there'd been a fatality and a family with a lawyer, so the whole night was preserved and copied. And it lives on a disk in a locked drawer in Warren's office, with an evidence tag on it. I have a key to that drawer. Every lead has a key to that drawer. Here's what I had always known about February 9th. It was in my statement. It was in the incident review. And it was the last thing I thought about most nights before I fell asleep. At 9:41 in the evening, a report came in on the primary of a vehicle in the water off the Camille Road access on the east end. Unidentified male voice, no ident, poor audio. I logged it as possible mutual aid. Nobody ever established who called it in, and I stopped expecting anyone to. I gave the call to Milo, who was the closest unit and the only one east of Beverly Shores, and I sent him to the Camille lot. And the Camille lot gate is chained from November to April. He got there, found the chain, told me, and I had to look up the alternate access and route him around through the Dunbar lot and back down the beach on foot. That took 4 minutes. 4 minutes of me reading off a screen while a 33-year-old man stood in the dark with his light on a padlock. It's on the tape. His voice going tight and polite. Copy, standing by. And then me. Dunbar, Service Road, north to the beach. You'll be about a quarter mile east of the mouth. There was no vehicle in the water. There was never a vehicle. He was on the beach for 11 minutes, and then he was on the air saying, there was somebody out past the bar. And then he wasn't on the air anymore. 4 minutes. I have carried 4 minutes around for 4 months. If I had known the gate was chained, and I did know the gate was chained, in the part of my brain that isn't running at 9:40 on a February night, he'd have gone to Dunbar first and been on that beach 4 minutes sooner, and none of the rest of it would have happened the way it did. That's what I believed. That's what the review believed. More or less, they called it a preventable delay in access routing. And put it in the corrective actions and moved on. Because you can't discipline a woman for a locked gate. So I sat in that closet on the milk crate with the good headphones on, and I played it. And I did what Kip taught me. I stopped listening to the words. The reporting voice at 9:41 has ice behind it. Faint, but it's there. That slow drag and settle. And in February, that means nothing at all. Because in February, the whole shoreline sounds like that. 9:40 on the 9th of February. There was shelf ice from Ogden Dunes to Michigan City. So that's not evidence. I knew it wasn't evidence. Then I played my own transmission. Me at 9:42 saying, 412, take the Camille Road lot. Report of a vehicle in the water. I'm in a brick building 4 miles inland with the doors shut and the HVAC running. Under my voice, and in the little pocket of air after I release the key where that recorder shows nothing but flat line, there it is. Groan and settle, groan and settle. I played it 11 or 12 times. I turned the gain up until my own breathing sounded like weather. It's in there. It is in the 4 seconds after I stopped talking. In a place where a machine wired to one channel in one room has no business hearing anything. And that's when the 4 minutes turned over on me. The 4 minutes weren't the mistake. The 4 minutes were the only thing that had ever gone right. That chain on that gate was the closest Milo Ferris came to living through the night. And the reason he didn't was that I got him around it. I found him the service road. I read him the turns. I put him on that beach. It didn't drown him. I dispatched him. I sat there until my legs went numb, and then I got up and did the only useful thing I could think of, which was to copy the February file, the June file, Kip's cleaned up background loops, and the 20-year incident sort onto a personal thumb drive that I keep on my house keys. Those are federal recordings from an ongoing liability matter. Putting them on private media is not a gray area and not a technicality. It's a removal of government records. It's in the handbook. And people lose their clearances and their jobs over less. I stood there with the drive in my hand and did the arithmetic on my father's room and Bernice and the courtyard. And then I put it in my pocket anyway, because I finally had something I could act on. And it wasn't the tapes. Nothing happens if nobody goes in. And nobody goes in unless I give it a number. I took it to Warren on a Monday, which was a mistake, because Monday is when the regional office calls him. I brought the laptop and a good pair of headphones, and I did it in the order I'd rehearsed. Repeater log first, because that's a document, and Warren trusts documents. Then the missing squelch tails, and I made him look at 20 normal transmissions with their little periods on the end, and then Milo's with nothing. Then Kip's isolated background, the ice, and I told him what month it was outside. Then February 9th, and my own voice, and the 4 seconds after it. He listened to that one 3 times. He took the headphones off and set them down on the desk very gently, the way you set down something that belongs to somebody else. And he sat back and looked out the window at the parking lot. "What do you want me to do with this?" he said. It wasn't hostile. It was almost a real question. "I want a standing exception for water calls on that channel. Any distress report with no callback, no corroboration, and no second reporting party. I hold it until somebody eyeballs the lot. 10 minutes. That's all I'm asking for. 10 minutes. On an uncorroborated report. And on the day a real kid is really face down off Central Avenue and the only person who saw it has a dead phone and a busted radio and no callback number." He turned back around. "Delia, that's the exact call you're describing. There is no daylight between them. That's what I'd have to sign." I said I'd take the risk. "You don't get to take it," he said. "That's the problem. You take it on a Tuesday, and a family in Valparaiso pays it on a Saturday." He did do things. I'll say that for him, because it matters. And because none of them helped. He put a finding in writing that we had an unresolved intermittent fault on the primary logging path, source undetermined. And he requested funds to replace the recorder. He asked for a second look from the vendor. And when the vendor's answer came back, no defect identified, recommend replacement of end-of-life equipment, Kip's maintenance agreement did not get renewed. Not in retaliation. Because a contractor who investigates a fault for 3 weeks and finds nothing is a contractor whose renewal is hard to justify to a procurement officer in a consolidation year. Kip called me from a job in Hobart to tell me. He was decent about it. He said his firm was still in on the county build-out, so it wasn't the end of the world. And then he said, "Hey, don't put that ice thing in an email, all right? I did that on my own time." So there went my technician. The third call came on the 25th of June, a Thursday, 6:15 in the evening, and I did not give it a number. Dispatch 412. Swimmer off the end of the breakwater. He's face down. Ice underneath. I heard it before he finished the sentence, the way you hear a car, coming up the street. I let the channel sit for a second and then I keyed up and said, "All units, disregard unverified traffic on the primary. There is no assignment. I say again, no assignment, no response. Stand by for my traffic only." That's not a form of words that exists anywhere in our procedures. I made it up on the spot, and it is a masterpiece of nothing. And it worked. Nobody moved. Ruthie keyed up once just her ident, nothing else. Which is Ruthie, for I'm listening and I don't like it. And then the channel went quiet. I sat there for 40 minutes with my hand on the desk. The beach detail closed out at 8. Nothing happened. Nobody drowned in Indiana that day. Nobody drowned in the park for the rest of that week. That was the best evening of the whole summer. And I've never been able to explain to anybody why I went home and sat in the driveway and cried about it. 2 nights later, my phone rang in the house at 11:40. Number came up as the center's second console, which is a line that dials out to exactly 4 people and which was, at 11:40 on a Saturday, sitting dark 6 feet from a night shift dispatcher named Angela, who was on the primary at the time and who did not touch it. "Delia," it said. That's all. Not a report, no unit ident, no location. My name in Milo's voice with the door dragging over grit behind it, and then it hung up. And the call showed a duration of 2 seconds on the phone log. And Angela swore up and down that nobody was at that console. That changed something in me, and it wasn't fear exactly. It was closer to insult. Because up until then, the thing had been running a script swimmer, breakwater, coordinates, and now it had figured out that the script wasn't working on me and had moved to something else. It had noticed me. It wanted the person at the console specifically. And it had my name. Ruthie put in a memo the same week requesting standing assignment to all water-related calls in the Portage and Ogden Dunes sectors for the remainder of the season. Warren approved it because she's the most qualified open water responder on the payroll by about 30 years, and because we were short 2 seasonals. I called her about it. I told her she was volunteering to be the one it wants. "I know," she said. I said that was the stupidest thing I'd ever heard out of a person with a pension. "Delia." She was in her truck. I could hear the blower. "It's had 2 runs at me, 82 June, and it's going to keep going. There's nobody else on this shore who knows to stop at the water line. If it gets a call through to some 23-year-old seasonal in August, that kid's in the lake before you finish the sentence." A car went by on her end. I'm not being brave. I'm being the cheapest thing available. I told her she'd stop at the water line for me. She said, "That's the plan." And there was something in the way she said it that I did not like at all. And I let it go. Because I was tired. And because there was a version of this where I never had to find out. The near miss was the 2nd of July. 6:50 in the evening, warm, half the county at the beach. I was working a lost child at West Beach, which is a real thing that happens 40 times a summer and which had my whole attention. And in the middle of it, the channel opened, and my own voice came out of it. 412, respond to the Portage lakefront lot, east side of the breakwater. Report of a swimmer in distress. You're the only unit. It's me. It is my voice, my cadence, the way I run 2 words together on lakefront lot. It's what I've said 10,000 times, and it is not something I said. And behind it, under the whole transmission, groan and settle. And Ruthie said, 412 en route. Not because she was fooled. I've thought about that a great deal since. She had my voice in her ear giving her an assignment on a recorded channel, and she was the standing water response. And she had every professional reason on earth to say those 2 words. That's what the memo she wrote was for. I broke in on top of her with the transmit key down, and I said her name, not her ident. And then I said, negative, negative. Cancel that assignment. That traffic did not originate from this console. All units hold your position and acknowledge by ident only. She came back 4 seconds later. 412 holding at the highway. She was already north on Marquette with her lights on. She sat in that road for a while, and then she drove back to the lot and called me on the phone, and neither of us said very much. Here's what I understood that night. Sitting in the center after the shift change, with the log open in front of me. It didn't need me to believe it. It never had. All it needed was for the channel to carry a report, for the report to become an assignment, and for a responder to acknowledge. 3 links. I'd been guarding the middle one like it was the only one, and it had just gone around me. It could make the report, and it could make the assignment. The only link left was the one wearing a badge and a duty belt. And she had signed a memo putting herself permanently in reach of it. Warren's directive came down on the 29th of June. I've got the order of things wrong there. It came before the 2nd of July. And I keep putting it after because that's the order it mattered in. It came out of the West Beach hesitation and the 90-day plan. 2 paragraphs, park-wide, effective immediately. All reports of persons in distress in or adjacent to water shall be dispatched immediately upon receipt. Communications personnel shall not withhold, delay, or filter such reports pending verification. Verification is a field function. It's the correct policy. If you handed that paragraph to any risk manager in the National Park Service, they'd sign it before they finished reading. It exists because of a real drowned man and a real 90 seconds, and because a dispatcher in a room cannot know what a ranger on a beach can see. It also made the only thing that had ever worked into a firing offense, with my name already on the counseling letter. I went to Warren one more time, and I didn't bring the laptop. I brought the June 25th log the night I refused, and I said, look, nobody died. Look at the week after. Nobody died on the 400 other nights you dispatched normally either, he said. That's not a finding, Delia. That's a Tuesday. Which is fair. Which is exactly right. And I want that in here. Because I have spent a lot of time being angry at a man whose only sin was needing evidence. Then he said the thing that ended it. The recorder in my back closet, the old rack unit with the 90-day window and the waveforms and the little squelch periods had come through as an approved replacement on the consolidation schedule. New digital unit, cloud retention, county standard. Installation in the 2nd week of August. That's good news, he said, and he meant it. You've been asking for that box for 3 years. The 4th fell on a Saturday. We were staffed for it the way we're always staffed for it, which is to say badly. Beaches at capacity by 10 in the morning. The west lots closed by 11. The fireworks barge staging off the marina. And the access roads stacked so solid that a fire engine coming out of Beverly Shores has to go the wrong way up the shoulder. I'd worked 11 of them. It is the single worst day of the year on that console, and I would not have missed it for anything. I had asked to be scheduled. I want to be straight about that, since it came up later. Ruthie's truck was in the lot when I got there at noon. She had her fins and her tube in the back bed, on top, not underneath the flares and the cones where she usually keeps them. I stood in the parking lot in the heat and looked at that for a good 10 seconds. Then I went inside, sat down, brought up the CAD, and pressed the transmit key on my console 4 or 5 times. The way you'd test a step you weren't sure of. It's an old console. That key has stuck open on me twice in 14 years, once in a thunderstorm and once for no reason at all. And both times it took the whole primary channel down with it until I noticed and knocked it loose with the side of my hand. I checked that it still did that. Then I put my headset on and worked my shift. By 7 that evening, I had 340 transmissions on the log and a headache behind my right eye. 2 heat cases, a bike and car at Camille, a fistfight in the Central Avenue lot, a woman who'd lost her mother's ashes in a tote bag, The barge was anchored off the marina, and the shoreline from Portage to Michigan City was one continuous crowd. When the wind came around to the north a little after 6, I watched the flag on the pole outside the window swing, and I knew what the water was going to do before anybody called me about it. At 7:52, the county pushed me a cell call from Porter Beach. Rip current, 4 people passed the second bar, one of them not swimming anymore. Then 2 more transfers stacked behind it within 40 seconds. And every one of them had a beach behind it, kids. A radio playing, somebody's air horn, real noise. That's what real sounds like. I dispatched it the way you're supposed to. Both protection rangers, the beach supervisor, Portage Fire, the county's water team, the Coast Guard station on the phone at the same time with my left hand. It took me maybe 50 seconds to move everything I had toward Porter Beach. And I remember thinking, clean, this is going to be clean. At 7:54, the channel opened and Milo said, "Dispatch 412. Kid off the end of the breakwater. He's gone under twice. I'm going in." Ice underneath. Loud this time, not faint at all. That slow drag and settle right up against the words like it was in the room. And Ruthie's ident came up on my screen. Not her voice, just the ident, which is what a radio sends the instant somebody keys up, a fraction of a second before a person starts talking. She was in the Portage lot. She was the closest unit to that wall by 2 miles, and she had fins in the top of her truck bed. And she had my voice in her ear from 2 days ago, telling her she was the only unit. I did not make a decision. I want to be honest about that, since it's the only part anybody ever asks me about. There was no moment where I weighed anything. My left hand came over and pressed the transmit key on my console and held it down. And my right hand came up and knocked it sideways at the base the way you'd knock a stuck window latch, and the key seated open, and the channel was mine. And then I talked, because an open carrier is just silence, and silence is something a person notices and works around. A voice is different. A voice on a channel is a thing you wait for. So I said, "All units, cancel any assignment to the Portage breakwater. The traffic did not originate from this console. There is no reported victim at that location. All Portage sector units acknowledge by moving to Porter Beach." And then I said it again. And again. I said it in different words, and then in the same words. And I read off the Porter Beach staging point. And I read off the wind and the wave height. And when I ran out of things that were true, I started reading the unit numbers off my own screen, one at a time, over and over, in a flat voice, like a woman calling a raffle, for about 4 minutes. I could see her ident on my screen the whole time. She keyed up 11 times, 11 separate attempts to talk on a channel with a base station sitting on top of it, and every one of them died before it started. Because that is how a repeater works, one carrier at a time, and mine was the loudest thing on that shore. She could hear me. She could not answer me. And nobody could assign her anything, because the only mouth in the county that can assign her anything was full. She stopped at the waterline. She told me later she got as far as the end of the wall with her fins in her hand, and stood there and looked down at that dark line where the rubble stops. And there was nothing in the water. Nothing at all. And nobody had given her a call. They got all 4 out at Porter Beach. 2 went to the hospital, and both of them walked out of it the next day. The one who wasn't swimming anymore turned out to be a 51-year-old man who'd been holding 2 children up over his head, which is why he'd stopped swimming. And he is alive, and I have never met him. At 7:56, 2 minutes into my 4, a woman in the Camille Road lot on the far east end of the park called 911 on her cell phone because her husband had gone down between the truck and the boardwalk with his hand on his chest. The county took the call. County transferred it to me, which is correct because Camille is ours. It hit my console as a ring I could see and could not answer, because I was mid-sentence on an open key. And their transfer would not complete on a channel I was holding down. Their dispatcher tried 3 times. Then somebody at the county with good instincts stopped waiting on me and toned out the volunteer department in Beverly Shores directly. And by then, it was 8:03, and Camille Road is 20 minutes from anything on a normal night. On the 4th of July, with the access road stacked, it was 31. His name was Dale Whitlock. He was 64. He had come out to watch the fireworks with his wife in a folding chair. The autopsy said the kind of cardiac event where the first 10 minutes are everything. And I've read the sentence in the review 100 times. And no one at any point in the process was cruel enough to tell me it would have gone differently. They didn't have to. Everybody in that room knew what 10 minutes is worth. The board of review took 4 hours, and they were fair to me. That's the worst part. They had the log, they had the audio. They had a transmission from the lead communications operator occupying the park's primary channel for 3 minutes and 51 seconds during a mass casualty-adjacent event, canceling an assignment that no consul had issued in violation of a written directive that had come down 5 days earlier, less than a month after a letter of counseling for the same thing. They asked me why. I told them the truth in about 90 seconds. I said I believed the report was false and that a specific ranger would enter deep water on it and that a person would not come back. I did not play them anything. I had a thumb drive in my pocket the whole time. February, June, the ice, all of it. And I sat there with my hand on it, and I did the arithmetic one last time, and I did not take it out. Producing it would have been a second offense, a removal of government records from an active liability matter. And it would have turned a termination into something with a referral attached to it. And it would not have saved me. Warren had already listened to all of it in his office in June, and he was the most sympathetic man in that building. So I said what I said. And there was no equipment finding to point at anymore, because the old recorder came out of my back closet on the 11th of August and went to a scrap contractor in Hammond. And the new one keeps everything in a data center in Virginia and does not draw waveforms. They didn't fire me for the ghost. They fired me for the 4 minutes. Removal for failure to follow a lawful directive and for interference with emergency communications during an active incident. My union rep got the language softened and the referral dropped, and that was genuinely the best anybody could have done. 14 years. And the federal insurance went with it. And the seniority differential. And my father moved out of the room with the courtyard in November into a place in LaPorte County where the television is bolted to the wall. Bernice sent a card. He didn't notice the move, which everybody keeps telling me is a mercy. And I've decided to let them have that one. I work nights at a call center in Merrillville now, taking after-hours reports for a plumbing franchise. It's a headset and a screen, and people who are angry about water in a way I find almost restful. The consolidation went through in the spring. Porter County runs the park's traffic out of downtown Valparaiso now. 12 positions and a training officer. And they are good at their jobs, and none of them know that the Camille Gate is chained after Halloween. Ruthie retired the last week of September. She called me once, in October, and got about 6 words in before she stopped. She said, "I would have gone in." Then, after a while, "I had the fins in my hand, Delia." I told her I knew. We talked about her sister in Ohio for 10 minutes, and then we hung up. And we have not spoken since. And I don't think either of us is angry. There's just nowhere for it to go. She stood at the end of that wall because I held a key down and cost a man in a folding chair his 10 minutes. And both of those things are mine. And no conversation is going to sort them into an order that makes sense. Nobody has drowned off the Portage breakwater since. It's been 13 months. I checked the paper. That's not evidence either. Kip mailed me a disc in February. No note, just my name on the sleeve in marker. Somebody at his firm had pulled a copy off the drive in the old recorder before the box went to scrap for a retention audit that nobody ever finished, and he'd found what was on it, and he'd made me a copy because he's 27 years old, and he thought I'd want it. It's my 4 minutes. All 3 minutes and 51 seconds of me reading unit numbers off a screen in that flat raffle voice. I played it in my kitchen with the good headphones, the ones I bought myself, and took home in a box with a coffee mug and a photograph. I turned the gain up the way he taught me until my own breathing sounded like weather. I remember every second of that transmission. I know what I said, and I know I never stopped talking long enough for anybody to get a word in. And I have the repeater log, and there's no other ident on the channel for the whole 351. But there's a place, about 2 minutes in, right after I read off Ruthie's number, where the tape has something in it that my ears did not. Groan and settle. And then, quiet, underneath my own voice, patient as a man waiting for you to finish a sentence. Copy that, boss. I shut it off. The disc is in the drawer with my father's paperwork, and I'm not going to play it again, and I have not thrown it away.